Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5-Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Hey, what's happening, Rush Nation? It is time for a Strategy Points podcast. Apologies that it's a little bit behind. It's in, I've promised one the last couple of weeks. It's not happened due to illness and last minute life things, unfortunately, that have happened. Still got COVID. I still tested positive, which is frustrating. But we continue and we plow on. Let's get straight into this. I don't want to make this too long, but if you're listening to this, you've made your fantasy football playoffs, or you just like the sound of my voice. If you like the sound of my voice, I really appreciate it. That means a lot to me. And maybe there's some things you can take part in next year. If you are still alive and you're in your fantasy football playoffs, there's a couple of different action points you can take here. First of all, congratulations. It's a great thing to make the fantasy football playoffs. I wrote a post yesterday on Twitter that analysts and people were getting absolutely slated for posting their success rate in fantasy football. I didn't post mine. If anyone wants to know, I'm happy to share it, right? I do track it. I think if you are an analyst, you always track these things, especially when you're in multiple leagues. If nothing else, it's for your own process. You want to know what you're doing right, what you're not doing right, where you want to improve. Some people post it as bragging. Some people post it as wanting to be accountable and saying, hey, listen, you take my advice, I apply it, this is how it works. Some people post it because they want to show transparency. Some people post it because they want to be better. I don't quite get the hate on people, like slating people for sharing this stuff. If you don't like it, you don't like it. That's fine. I don't actively go out and seek that kind of content myself. If I follow analysts, it's because I know them and I trust their advice. I don't feel the need for them to validate to me what their playoff record is. But at the same token, I wouldn't slate anybody for posting that. Like, I think it's important to share. But also, if you made 80% of your playoffs, that's an awesome metric. Like, that's a great rate. And you should celebrate that. It's funny. It's a game. Like, at the bottom line of this, it's a game. And if you did really well, celebrate it. Like, I know you haven't won anything yet, but you should still celebrate. It's still a marginal win. It's still something worth celebrating. Its achievement of 4+ months of hard work, maybe even 6 months plus of hard work if you think of the research and the drafts. I just don't get that point of having a go at someone for sharing what they've done this season. I don't get it. But that's me off my soapbox. I just, yeah. If anyone wants to know my playoff rate, I'm happy to share it. If you don't, I'm not offended if you don't ask. It doesn't bother me. But you've made your playoffs. There's two streams of thought to this. The first one is if you're on a bye. And most players, when they get a bye, they think, great, I've got the week off. I don't need to set a lineup. I don't need to do anything. I can watch the chaos unfold. Wrong. If you are a 1 and 2 seed and you lose and you don't do anything this week, that is part of the reason why. It's not the whole reason. Sometimes it's luck. Sometimes it's injuries. There's all sorts of other things that can affect the result. But ultimately, a bye week when you've got the 1 and 2 seed is not a week off. It's a week you don't have to set a lineup, but it's not a week off. If you didn't submit any waivers this week, I don't know what you were doing. Maybe there wasn't anyone on the waiver wire list that you didn't really want to add, and that's fine. But actually, this is the opportunity now. You've been given this supreme advantage. The bye is not an advantage of just moving forward another round. It's preparing for your semi-final a week before your opponent does. I know what someone's going to say to me. I don't know who my semi-final opponent is. You don't. But you got a choice of two. You know it's going to be this person or this person. Look at both their rosters. Prepare as if you're playing both. Where are they weak? Excuse me. Where are they strong? Where are they likely to add to the waiver wire next week? Where can I start planning as to how to make their team harder to pick up players? Where can I start to get a strategic advantage? Are they streaming quarterback because they've lost all their quarterbacks? Could be. If they're the 5th or 6th seed, that's quite likely. So who is a competent backup I can take and stop them from streaming a quarterback next week? Are they playing Tua Tagovailoa in the playoffs? He's got a horrendous schedule. Have a think about look at the matchups that you're going to be potentially up against next week and look and see where your advantage is and where your disadvantage is and where they have an advantage over you, and start working as to what you can do to plug the gaps. Look at your roster. One of the big things now is to look at your bench. You're going to have players, especially if you're a 1 or 2 seed, your squad is stacked, but you're going to have players that you've got no intention of playing. And they're there effectively as cover. Maybe they're there as blockers. Now, if you're holding on to certain players and they're not really going to contribute to your fantasy success, there is an argument of dropping them, and then it's about when you drop them. So if I was sitting here as a 1 and 2 seed, I'm looking at my leagues where I've got the 1 and 2 seed. I'm looking at who I'm potentially playing next week. I've got a choice of 2 opponents. I've got a pen and paper out because I'm old school, but you could do it in a Google sheet. I'm working out potential projected points, and I'm doing that by looking at what their points per game average is. Quickest way to do it, go on to fantasypros.com, look at leaders by position, and then do a simple search for player and look at their points per game. They rank them by points per game totals. So pick your scoring format, and then if you're in a custom format, then pick the one closest to it. You can do it in Sleeper. It probably is a little bit more work. So if your league is in Sleeper, it's a custom league. You could just take their points totals divided by the number of games. That's another easy way of doing it. But Fantasy Pros takes a lot of the work out for you if you play just PPR, half point PPR standard. Excuse me, I still have COVID. So if you are in that boat, you sit there, you take your opponent's points per game per player, and you start to analyze which team is most likely to beat you, i.e. which team most likely win this week. And you start playing for that, but then you plan for both scenarios, injuries, etc. And then you look at where they might attack the waiver wire this week, and then you think about where you would make additions, and I would do it on Sunday, maybe Saturday night. And ultimately, you do that because you don't want the players you drop to be playing in that quarterfinal on Saturday, Sunday. Obviously, there's games Saturday and Sunday this week, so this is when you pick your timings. You make sure you make the additions before kickoffs of players that are going to be useful or going to be potential blocks for your opponent. That might be a DST choice if they're streaming DST. That might be a quarterback choice if it's a quarterback. That might be picking up some handcuff running backs. Rico Dowdle I've talked about a million times this season. Imagine Ty Chandler was picked up quite a bit this week, but Ty Chandler would be one. Jerick McKinnon. These are the sorts of players you want to be picking up in case something happens to a lead back, and taking advantage of those situations. So keep an eye on those. And I would say now, as a team that's in the playoffs, unless you've got a stud wide receiver on your bench, you probably don't need that many wide receivers on your bench now, because they're a bit of a muchness once you get around the wide receiver 30 range. Wide receiver 30 to wide receiver 50, there's just not a lot of variance. It's more matchup dependent. So actually, you can look at the players who are on your bench. You can look at their matchups. If you've got people like Devontae Parker, for example, might be a great candidate for someone you could get rid of, for example. So have a look at who you've got on your benches. Have a look at your rosters. If you want, you can join the Patreon. I'll do some analysis for you and tell you where I would tweak all of your benches. You can join patreon.com/5yardrush and join for a very modest fee. Also, just to mention, I'm going to be freezing Patreon payments from January till probably May. But I'll still be posting stuff and we'll still have the chat. So you can join now, literally join for like a month's fee. And then you get effectively 6 months to join. So it's better time than ever to make the most of it. So that really is as a 1 seed and a 2 seed, you've got to be outworking your opponents. You've got here not by luck, you've got here because you've drafted. Well, there's a bit of it luck with it with injuries, but ultimately you've adapted to situations, you've made the most of it. Now you got to press home that advantage. Do not take the week off. Look at your roster, look at where you can make some trims. I'd be stacking up on running backs. I'd be stacking up on an extra DST if your team is streaming, if your opponent's team is streaming DSTs. I'll be stacking up on extra quarterback if they're streaming quarterbacks. I'd be stacking up in areas where your opponent is going to be weak. And I'd be dropping players who are just going to not really play, but I would drop them so they don't affect results of quarterfinals. And you've still got the opportunity to try and pick them up off the waiver wire next week. For everybody else, there's some tips here, right? So I've talked about some of this stuff already. Excuse me. But being active on the waiver wire is so crucial, right? Because at this point of the season, one injury can crown the league winner. We could really see a running back go down and another back come through, and that running back becomes a league winner. We've seen it with so many running backs over the years. We've seen it with Anderson when he was in LA, when Todd Gurley went down. We saw it with I'm trying to think of them all now. Situation of the Chiefs where Damian Williams, when Kareem Hunt got cut from the team for misdemeanors. We've seen it with Chuba Hubbard in Carolina when CMC went down. We've seen it a lot ultimately, and looking at the big workhawk backs, you're looking at the biggest workloads we're seeing. Josh Jacobs, so Zamir White is definitely in play there. We're looking at Christian McCaffrey, so Jordan Mason, because Elijah Mitchell isn't quite fit there. We're looking at Travis Etienne, so Tank Bigsby, Donis Johnson, and then we're looking at even Rashad White. I wouldn't necessarily be banking on the backup running back there because I think there isn't anybody worth a pinch of salt who's going to fill the role that Rashad White is doing right now. But if you had to, I guess Chase Edmonds, but I wouldn't put him. Rico Dowdle, Tony Pollard, etc. These are the ones I've talked about. These guys before about high touch volumes are going to lead to high propensity of injuries. Tajay Spears is already again another one if he's still free. He's already getting more work off Derrick Henry. I've talked about this quite a few times already. A lot of this sounds the same. It's all with this principle in mind. You've got to stack your benches with these backup running backs. These are your lottery tickets. If you hit, you're protecting yourself in your position, but you also might be adding to your strong team even further. I'm also not against handcuffing your own running back. So if you have one of these premium running backs, all season's about handcuff other people's running backs. But now with such a short window between now and the title, it's okay to handcuff your own back. If you want to handcuff your own running back because you got one of those premium running backs, that's okay. That is okay now. It's zero sum earlier in the season, but now with such a short window where literally a twisted ankle, a fall, a sprained wrist, a hyperextension, that could rule them out for the rest of the fantasy season because it is only 2 weeks long from now. It's literally, we've got 17 days until the end, 18 days till the end of the fantasy season. So those kind of injuries will rule people out for that long. And that is why it's okay to handcuff your own running back because there's not enough time to sign someone, integrate them, do it in. It's fine. So you can do that, and you should. You should be looking at handcuffing your own premium running backs if you can. I've talked about matchup analysis. It's really key. You've got to look at the next 3 games that your players have got. Where are their inefficiencies, especially at kicker, especially at DST. It's okay to change your DST now. If you don't have one of those premium DSTs, it's okay to go into the pool and go get a different one. It's okay to stream it every week. It's okay to go and pick the Raiders this week. And the Bengals, they're good streaming matchups. Even the Falcons have a good schedule. These are good running DST options. You can go get the Rams is another good one. You've got to stay informed, right? So we're 18 days from the end of this thing. You've got to set up alerts on your favorite analysts, your favorite news sites. You've got to be first to the news now, more than at any other time in the season, because it is one of these injuries. Literally, someone could be picked up off the waiver wire or free agency. You miss it, you're out. So you've got to make sure I've noticed this season that Sleeper is breaking the news about 10 minutes behind what the analysts are doing on X or Twitter. So if you're following that, make sure you do that. That's going to be crucial. Other really simple things. Start your studs. Goes without saying. Don't overthink matchups. If you've got a star player, even if they're in a down week, don't overthink things. Just go ahead and just start your best players. Make the most of it. It's really key that you do that. So, if Tony Pollard has a bad week, don't think, okay, well, I can't start him this week. Don't overthink things. Your star players are your star players. If you picked them in the first couple of rounds of drafts, play them. This is what you picked them for this big position. This is one that no one gets talked about. Everyone's like into stacking, and that's amazing, right? And I get the logic on it. But I would be starting to diversify my teams a little bit. Because what if you're stacked on a team and have a really bad game? Like, for example, the Chargers, right? If you stack the Chargers right now, you had Herbert, Eckler, and Allen. Herbert's done. Eckler's lost his job to a degree. He's now in a timeshare, and it's hot hand wins. And Allen is now getting thrown the ball by Easton Stick. Like, you've got to diversify that portfolio a little bit. So you've got to think about picking up alternative players. I'm not saying you drop Eckler, but I'm saying my point is you've got to maybe put him on your bench. You've got to look at other teams. You've got to try and think about, I don't want to leverage all of my risk onto a team, because if they don't show up, then I'm out. Spread, diversify your team. Think about having mixes of different teams, so that if one team does fall apart, and we've seen it so many times. I mean, who predicted that the Dolphins would fall apart to the Titans this week? Like, these things happen, especially this time of year. Pressure sets in, lots to play for. It's a heightened sense of awareness. No one expected the Steelers to lose to the Cardinals and the Patriots in back-to-back weeks. So, we think we're good at picking games, but ultimately, human emotions involved and controlled. We've got to keep an eye on it. Diversify your portfolio. Start looking at having different players from different teams. I've talked about looking at the playoff schedule. So have a look at the playoff schedule. Look at the positions in which your teams are giving points up on. So, for example, how many fantasy points per game are the Patriots giving up to wide receivers? If you've got a wide receiver giving up if you've got a wide receiver playing against the Patriots this week. So, you can do that on Fantasy Pros. You can have a look at that and use the tools there to be there. Weather conditions play a bigger part of the season now than any other, and they can really ruin it. Don't overthink it, but Matt Thornton on Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it now, he does an amazing weather report every week. I'm going to retweet it for last week's, or maybe this week's if I find it, and point to it. So follow me and follow this weather report. He literally does analysis of every single game, what the weather's like, and what the impact of that weather is going to be. Really important this time of year when making some key lineup decisions. So definitely take that into consideration. This is a common one. People chase last week's performance as a trend. Just don't, take it in isolation. Look at the points per game. Look at what people have done over a season. See if they did have a spike week. Why did they have a spike week? Was it increased stats? Was it increased routes run? Was it against a really bad opponent? What were the circumstances that led to that? And see if you can project that going forward. If you've got any questions, you can get in touch with me. But you've always got to be thinking ahead as well. Even if you've got 3 through 6 seeds, you've got to be thinking about next week. You'll have one eye on that fixture next week, because it's no good winning this week and losing next week. You're going to be the underdog next week. So if you're going to go in next week as the underdog, you got to make sure that you are ahead. And they've got the bye week. I've just talked about. They've got the whole week to plan to play you. So now you've got to do double the work in half the time. So you really have to keep an eye on that. You can fall behind really quickly. I hope this has been really useful. It's a very different podcast to probably anything you're going to hear this week. But I think different is good. I think it's good to have the strategy behind what you're trying to achieve. I hope this information has been useful if you followed me for a while, you'll know some of this. It's always a good reminder. I like to be reminded of stuff once a year about best practice and how to do things. So hopefully this has been really useful to you. I'm going to drop a Patreon cast later on today. So if you get the chance to join the Patreon, you can listen to the Patreon cast. I'm going to go into a lot more depth or quality of like specific players and playoff runs and schedules, and I'm going to do a lot more strategy stuff over on the Patreon cast. So you can subscribe there. And as I said, you sign up for this month, you pay for this month, and then the next few months are free. So you get like effectively 6 months for the price of one at the moment. So you can do that, and it'll be a really good way to sort of sample the community. It's, I'm still going to be posting stuff. The WhatsApp chat's still going to be going through that time, so you can join, interact, get involved, and help coach your team. Ultimately, that's the whole point. So take advantage of that. So let's go get it this week, Rush Nation. I'm going to be back tonight with hopefully Stocks, if he's well enough. We're going to do a flagship show. Bring some questions if you want to bring some questions. But appreciate all the support. I know it's been a bit of a rocky year. I know there's been a few shows missed with illness and all the sorts of other bits and pieces. But I hope we're able to deliver some ships to you. We've delivered some great content this year. And we've hit a lot of contrarian plays that have worked out well. So hopefully you've listened to us all season and you've hit some big results and you're where you want to be right now. And if you're not, then let's get you to where you want to be. So thank you, as always, Rush Nation, for tuning in. I'll see you later tonight. And don't forget, as always, keep rushing.